House will come to order. The Pledge of Allegiance this morning will be led by Kendall Hollins from Lone Tree Elementary and Bree Hollins from Highlands Ranch High School.
May you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Representative Salazar. Hold on one second, guys. Or Aaron Duran. Here, you want to take a picture?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As you guys know, today is Cinco de Mayo, also known as the anniversary of the Battle of Puebla. It is the victory of Mexico over French forces in 1862. Let's not get that mistake in the Battle of Puebla with the Battle of Duran. Okay, those are two different things. Okay. The Battle of Puebla lasted much shorter than the other one. Okay.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In all seriousness, I do want to thank the Bryant Webster Dual Language School Mariachi Group for being here today. They are from House District 5, and the Latino Caucus worked very hard to get them here and be able to perform for all of you today.
Vámonos.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kohler, can you please take the roll?
Representative Becker. Representative Becker. I don't know. Absent. Buck. Buckner. Here. Conti. Corum. Court. Representative Becker is present. Del Grosso. Dorr. Duran. Everett. Exum. Fields. Fisher. I gotcha. Foote. Garcia. Gardner. Giroux.
Hi, Corey.
Janal. Hamner. Representative Hamner. Holbert. Hollinghorse. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Kraftarp. Labuda. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lebsock. Lee. May. McCann. McLaughlin. McNulty. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Murray. Navarro. Nordberg. Pabon. Peniston. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Rosenthal. Ryden. Representative Ryden. Okay. Sane. Salazar. Schaefer. Scott. Singer. Representative Singer. Sonnenberg. Stevens. Swam. Zabo. Tyler. Vigil. Waller. Williams. Wilson. Wright. Young. Speaker Ferrandino.
With 65 members present, good way to start the last 3 days of session. Quorum is present. Representative Everett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the reading of the Journal of May 2nd, 2014 be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Representative Everett, I don't think that's going to help you in your election.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't have any interns named Monica, so I think we're good.
You've heard the motion in a kind of President Clinton voice. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. Maybe on Wednesday we'll make him read it, but for today, not so much. The reading of the Journal is passed. I mean, the motion is passed. Yeah, exactly. Okay, announcements and introductions. Representative Buckner.
This morning, the pledge was given by my cousin. I'd like to introduce the entire family, Mr. and Mrs. Philonzo Hollins, and Bree and Kendall. Great family. Let's give them a hand and welcome them to the chamber.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to tell Representative Everett I don't like being made fun of. I feel discriminated against, and just because I sound lousy doesn't mean it's fair to make fun of me.
I guess you sound like this.
Two things. Democrats, lunch will be available for you about noon in the Barney Ford room in case we go through lunch. So lunch will be taken care of. Also, I don't know if they're here yet, but Good Shepherd School in my district, fourth grade class. Hi, kids.
And also, I have a group of fourth graders for Most Precious Blood Catholic School. Are they here yet? Not yet, but join me in welcoming them. Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have a student from Northridge High School up in Greeley, Colorado, Amanda Carey, who's visiting me today and shadowing me. Please recognize her. Thank you.
Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce a group of students from Golden and Wheat Ridge Montessori schools who won a fundraiser raffle prize to go to the Capitol and be with the principal for the day. They're going to be taking a tour to learn about the legislative process, and they are an exciting group of young people, very dedicated to getting a good education. Would you please welcome them and their principal, Bill Cottonsteady, from the Montessori schools in Golden and Wheat Ridge. Good morning. Thank you.
Representative Becker.
The Conference Committee for House Bill 1180, we will be meeting after Hummers today, so long as that works for Representative Fisher. So this is the Conference Committee on the Hunting and Guiding Outfitters. Thanks.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a group from Rangeview High School. Great high school, great students. Let's welcome them.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conference Committee on House Bill 1298 will meet today at 1 o'clock in House Committee Room 112. The Education Committee will meet upon adjournment of the Conference Committee, so we'll see you there.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why it's so quiet in here. What's wrong with you guys? Colleagues, today is the day we're doing Hummers, and if you're a Republican and I haven't given you a script, come find me.
That is a really thick script.
Yeah, well, it is. We're going to be here for a while. It's Exodus. Anyway, in the beginning there was a Republican,
and then God made a Democrat.
Out of the Republicans' rib, and it's been a pain in our rib ever since. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But members, what I wanted to let you know is that we're going to be doing, those of you that may not have attended before, we'd really like you to come back this year. Representative Fisher, I've taken Voldemort out. Representative Tracy Kraft-Tharp, I've taken Jabba out. There is a special tribute to those members that are leaving. And the majority members should be most interested in the fact that for doppelgangers, I've opened it up and it's very bipartisan. I invite you to come and witness Representative Lawrence will regret the fact that she let Senator Stedman take a picture of her downstairs with a whip. I don't know if you've read 50 Shades of Grey, but anyway, members, so please, no, I didn't completely. But anyway, so members, please join us at 4 o'clock. We do want you to come. It's a time to say thank you too, so please come.
Thank you, Representative Giroux, and we look forward to a very fun afternoon. Seeing no further announcements or introductions, members, please return to your desks. We will proceed to our next order of business. Third reading of bills, final passage. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House proceed out of order to consider House Bills 1398, 1389, and 1395 at the top of the third reading calendar.
Seeing no objection, the bills listed by the Majority Leader will be put to the top of the third reading calendar. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1398.
House Bill 1398 by Representative Singer, also Senators Stebbins and Balmer, concerning the provision of financial services to licensed marijuana businesses in connection with making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1398 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1398 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Landgraf and Sonnenberg. Close the machine with 37 aye votes, 28 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1398 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1389.
House Bill 1389 by Representatives Pabon and Del Grosso, also Senator Sheffel, concerning a sales and use tax exemption for information technology equipment that is used in certain data centers in connection with making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1389 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1389 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Scott, Sonnenberg, and Waller. Close the machine. With 48 aye votes, 17 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, House Bill 1389 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1395.
House Bill 1395 by Representative Giroux, also Senator Lambert, concerning information technology budget requests in connection with moving the review and prioritization of information technology budget requests previously requested as capital construction and the Joint Technology Committee, establishing specific deadlines for information technology budget requests and making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1395 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of House Bill 1395 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Gardner and Lee. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1395 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the Senate Bill 176.
Senate Bill 176 by Senator John Stiles, Representatives Murray and Court, concerning crimes related to entities that trade in stolen vehicles in connection with making an appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 176 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 176 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, open the machine. Members vote. Representatives McCann and McNulty. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 176 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 23.
Senate Bill 23 by Senator Schwartz, also Representative Becker, concerning authorization of the voluntary transfer of water efficiency savings to the Colorado Water Conservation Board for in-stream use purposes and water divisions that include lands west of the Continental Divide.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 23 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, we had, I think, one of the longest debates that we had all session on this bill. And I know that shows the level of importance that many of us, perhaps all of us, once we come to a vote on this side of the aisle, and I know some of our Democratic colleagues, the concerns that we have with this bill. And the concerns don't relate to in-stream flows. While you won't find unanimity on in-stream flows either, you'll find bipartisan support for in-stream flows. The issue that we have with Senate Bill 23 is the attempt to make a water right, in this case what is commonly known as a saved water right, out of somebody else's water. There is no such thing as saved water. The water that seeps out the bottom of a ditch makes its way back to the groundwater, which makes its way back to the river, which makes its way into somebody else's water right. So when you line that ditch and you keep that water from making its way back down into the water table and back to the river, you're prohibiting somebody else's water. You're injuring another water right. And if you do go back through the analysis that the water courts and the state engineer do and water lawyers on both sides, when someone goes to sell a water right, they sell the consumptive use. They don't get to sell all of that water. They only get to sell the water that is lost to the system, the water that the crops use, the water that the animals use. They don't get to sell all of it. They only get to sell a portion of it. In this case, all of it is making its way back into the system. And while not all of it may make its way to that next water right owner, if you're not saturating the bottom of that ditch, if you're not allowing the aquifer to remain whole, if you're not allowing the water to make its way back to the river, you are impeding that next water right. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with conservation. Our friends in agriculture have taken conservation a long way. After all, it is in their interest to make the best use out of this most limited resource. What Senate Bill 23 does is, as we said many times, probably so many times that those who support the bill were tired of hearing it, it allows the state to steal other people's water. The state's the only one who can hold an in-stream flow. So when the state takes these saved water rights, they're taking someone else's water. And it's the junior rights that are hurt first and hurt the worst. So you may think that you are voting for conservation. You may think that you are voting to create new water that can be used in in-stream flows. You may think that you are doing right by the environment, but if you vote for this bill, you are doing wrong by agriculture. You are doing wrong by rural Colorado. And you are doing wrong by the water rights owners. Typically, those men and women who are working so hard to put food and fiber on your table. That's the decision that you're going to make. So cast your vote on Senate Bill 23, but know that you are doing long-term harm, that you are creating plenty of work for water lawyers, but you're doing nothing right by water rights owners. No vote on Senate Bill 23.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll indeed be brief. I just want to hit the highlights, those things that we had talked about last week. I can't add much to what Representative McNulty so eloquently said, but I do want to hit a couple of things. I understand that this bill is solely about ag water. He talked about conservation, and I will tell you that agriculture has led in the conservation efforts. If you remember, when agriculture first started irrigating. And if this bill was in effect 30 years ago, flood irrigation, which may be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% efficient, if we would have taken that extra 60% of water and put it into in-stream flows, never again to be returned for the use of cities, growing cities, or other users, that water, 60% of that water would have left the system. Agriculture now, through on their own, have created efficiencies by using different types of irrigation to better utilize that water, so that water does stay in the system for other folks. This bill 30 years ago would have taken that water out of the system, which was not their water to take out. It was somebody else's water. And Representative McNulty was very correct, was right, when he said that extra water, that conserved water, is somebody else's water right. There is no such thing as a saved water right or a conserved water right unless you pass this bill. And if you pass this bill, that conserved water right damages the rest of agriculture. Or, as we heard the argument, well, if it causes damage, we can't utilize that water right. It would not be approved. The important part of that discussion is, how much will it cost that individual farmer to challenge the damage to his water right? And if he has to spend that type of money, which typically a change of use case, it's going to take $100 grand. If he has to spend $100 grand to defend that water right, will that mean his son or daughter cannot come back to the farm? Will that mean that money is spent somewhere else than to keep young people in agriculture? Understand, ladies and gentlemen, this bill is solely about taking water from agriculture. It says right in the bill, ag water. The last point I want to make is, if this water goes to CWCB, it never comes back. There are no provisions in law to ever allow water to go back into the system. So places like Grand Junction, places on the eastern slope, can meet the needs of growing cities. That water is out of the system. That water is now a state water right for in-stream use, not to be used to meet our growing needs and our water shortages, in which the Swazi report has expressed concerns. Members, I would ask you not to fire a shot at agriculture. I would ask you to allow the water to remain in the system and vote no on Senate Bill 23.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 23 has so many things that are wrong with it. There's really not enough time, again, to go through all of the things that we've already discussed for multiple hours last week. And I suspect that nothing that we're going to say at this microphone is going to change anyone's vote at this point on Senate Bill 23. As you remember, we tried to say what's fair is fair. We had an amendment that would apply this to the Front Range as well as the West Slope, and my colleagues rejected that. That's a very sad thing in the scope of what we do here as a House of Representatives. My concern is, again, unintended consequences, maybe not next year, maybe a couple years down the road if we're all still serving together, we'll have to deal with this issue again. And it could have to do with water law issues. It could have to do with water court issues. It could have to do with compact issues. We don't know. And when you don't know something, it makes it very, very dangerous to vote for something and say, yes, it's okay. We understand part of our colleagues' concerns about conservation. We get that. That's been an argument going on for years and years and years. Is this the right step, or one of multiple steps that need to be taken over the next few years or the next decade to help protect more of Colorado's water? I think not. Had this been some type of a conservation bill that encompassed the entire state of Colorado, the argument could have been made that maybe this was good for the entire state of Colorado, to try to figure out ways to conserve water. But when you're only slicing part of the state out and saying, Western Colorado, you're our guinea pig, we're going to see if we can make this work, and it has absolutely no impact on us. That's a very dangerous position to take. I know we've had multiple arguments about the war on rural Colorado. Well, I think everybody's kind of over that by now, except Libby. Because obviously that chant and that rage and all the things that we've said throughout this session have really not resonated well with my colleagues on the other side, or my colleagues from eastern Colorado on both sides. Because we still have issues that are dividing this state, and that's not what our job is. We have to do good for all the people in the state of Colorado, not just some. And yes, I'm sure part of this group believes that they've done the right thing by pushing the yes vote today on SB 23, but I can tell you, colleagues, I have grave concerns about the future of water conservation, what snowball this may start to roll for the future of other rivers within the state of Colorado, and what other states may do to attack our compact agreements years from now. We're already at a breaking point as it is. We're already stretched as far as we can go. We can't even meet the compacts right now under the requirements that are there. And I don't remember during the arguments if Representative Coram may have brought this up or not, but because of the way the compacts are established, Lake Powell, Lake Mead have priority over reservoirs here in Colorado. I don't know if you know that or not. And this goes to the 30s and then the 50s and the 40s when these compacts were made. There is actually a scenario out there that if a call is put on the Colorado River for Lake Mead or Lake Powell, we could have a serious situation with water storage. Blue Mesa Reservoir, the one that you've heard about being the largest in the state of Colorado, has a junior water right to Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Literally, that reservoir could be drained to supply water to other states. That's something I hope you consider in the future. And I really, really believe this should have been an interim study to take a look at conservation in a much broader scope, because the damage that could be done by SB 23 is unbelievable. And we may be very, very, very sorry that we had this vote today. I really urge you, if at all possible, to think about voting against SB 23.
Representative Rankin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope you've all enjoyed your seminar on water law over the last few days, because to tell you the truth, we're going to need it as the water plan emerges. So, you know, try to remember as much as you can about all these details, because we will be discussing them, those of us who make it back next year. I just want to remind you, you know, I'm not going to go back over the water seminar, but I do want to remind you that I represent probably the biggest piece of these waters that are affected. Rivers with colorful names, the Yampa and the White and the Colorado and the Roaring Fork and the Crystal. You know, these rivers and the many people who live along them and who've lived along them for generations will be affected, as will the recreational users, fly fishermen like myself, rafters. So what we're talking about here really does have effect on real rivers, beautiful, colorful Colorado rivers, and people who've lived on them for many generations. So let's take seriously when we talk about water law and when we changed it. You've heard the details, but I also am here representing the Colorado River Water District, whose delegates represent most all of the Colorado River Basin. They've asked me to come here representing them to ask you to let us continue to work on the in-stream flow problem the way we have. I want to deviate just a little bit because it applies to the Agriculture Committee and its actions in water, of which this is a part. You know, they bring us, when this community brings us a bill on which they're divided, which this is one of, I really don't think that's a good idea. I really don't think we as elected members who don't have 40, 50 years of water law operating as a body ought to adjudicate between these water interests, because it's a very complicated thing. So when they brought us this bill, you know, I sat there through the first 8 hours of testimony and decided we shouldn't pass this bill. I think one of the witnesses actually looked at me and said, I wouldn't be surprised if you threw this back at us and told us to go bring you a bill that we agreed on. Members, that's exactly the issue here. The water community came to us, and the environmental community also had their say, and they just didn't agree. And that's led us to waste. I think it's good because we've been through water law. We've spent a lot of time on this. We spent 8 hours in judicial, I think 9 hours in agriculture. How much time did we spend on the floor? You can tell that there's disagreement. What this body ought to do, and I'm asking you to do, is let's don't pass this bill. Because believe me, this will not be the end of in-stream flow. It's been around for 25 years or more. I talked to people on this board who voted for and against this bill, and they told me the history. They talked about how we tried to divert water 30 years ago and how these same problems of upstream juniors and downstream juniors and in-stream flow have been with us for a long time. What I am asking you to do on behalf of the people I represent is let's defeat this bill, and then we know, we don't even have to tell them to do it. The Interim Water Review Committee, the roundtables, the water plan, all of this will very seriously consider in-stream flows. It will be a part of what we do going forward. But this bill will complicate it. This bill is going to cause a lot of controversy. It's going to make people mad on both sides because it's not perfect, and it's just not going to get us where we need to get to. And I've told you before, I support in-stream flows. I'm a fly fisherman and a recreationalist, and I consider myself an environmentalist working to protect western rivers. I mean, that's going to be one of my main thrusts as long as I'm in this body. But this is not the way to do it. These people who have 50 years or more of water law and their great-granddaddy dug that ditch, they don't agree on this bill. And we should not give them something that they don't come to us with agreement. I'm telling you, that's the way I feel very strongly about this. It's just going to be a mess. So let's just vote against it. It won't take much, and we'll start over with in-stream flow. Thank you.
Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I am so grateful for those of us in this chamber who have expertise in water law. Representative McNulty, thank you for your leadership from Douglas County on that issue and for your words here this morning, Representative Sonnenberg. I think a tremendous loss with those two members leaving this chamber. I've learned when it comes to water law to listen, and I would ask the members who represent the communities of Aurora and where I am in Parker to think carefully. If you're undecided about this bill, if you've made a decision based on affiliation or political perspective, stop for a moment and think. When it comes to water issues, the place where I go for the advice, I've talked about Parker Water and the reuse system that we've built there with Reuter Hess. And it's such an amazing system, and looking forward to the future of the communities that I represent in Douglas County. I've also mentioned that we're storing water in Rudder-Hess now for Aurora. So where is Parker Water and Aurora Water on this bill? I hope you've received this position flyer from Aurora Water. I don't represent any of Aurora anymore. I used to have a small piece of annex, but thank you to Aurora Water for bringing me this flyer that explains their opposition. But Aurora Water is asking for a no vote on this bill, as is Parker Water. We tend to be rather different communities. Douglas County, more conservative and Republican in nature, and Arapahoe and Aurora, maybe the other direction. But here we have something that cuts across party lines, cuts across political ideology. We have something, the most critical thing in common for the future of our communities, that is water. It's more important than our political ideology or our affiliation. Listen, please, to the experts in our communities who are in charge of that precious commodity, the future of our community, the future of our property values. Water is the key. Our future depends on water. And Parker Water and Aurora Water, though the communities might be different on different issues, they're together on this one, and they're asking for a no vote. I can't stand here and quote water law and history like my colleagues have this morning, but I can look to now and I can point to the future. And the people who are in charge of that, that's not us. The people at Aurora Water and Parker Water, they hold the future of our communities when it comes to this most precious resource. And Parker and Aurora Water are asking for a no vote. I'm voting no. I'm asking you to listen to the experts in our communities and join me in opposing this bill with a no vote.
Representative Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And colleagues, I just want to be the voice for the Colorado Farm Bureau right now. And for some of you that are staying here in the legislature and what you want to be proud of, and some of those who are leaving the legislature with a legacy, a vote for this bill is nothing less than stealing water rights. And you don't want to be remembered for stealing water rights. Please, I ask for a no on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Corum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's a situation that we're dealing with with this bill that perception is reality. This may be the finest bill in the world, but the people that are affected most by this bill, and understand that this only applies to those regions on the western slope that are affected by this bill. Colorado River District, which represents 72% of the water on the western slope. There's actually 80% of the waters on the western slope. Colorado River District, which manages 72% of the 80%, are in opposition to this bill. They know that it's got faults. Perception is this is an attack on western Colorado. I think it may be. It's an attack on farmers and ranchers. No doubt it is. Representative Sonnenberg mentioned that to go to water court to prove that you're damaged will cost you $100,000. Members, if you're borrowing money, and money is hard to borrow. In many cases, if you can go to the bank and get money to operate on this today, you may not even need a bank because restrictions are so heavy. But if your profit margin is not there, you cannot pay that mortgage, your option is you sell the farm. Representative Sonnenberg mentioned this will cause several people not to come back to the farm. Members, this is devastating to rural Colorado. We have the ability to manage this through our roundtable system, through our interim water, through a coalition of water users to create something that is right. It's wrong. You know, we had people sleeping through it when we talked Friday night, Saturday morning. Same thing's going on today. Apparently, it's not a lot of interest in saving the rights of rural Colorado. Members, look down, you ignore, doesn't matter. I have no doubts the outcome of this bill. But just remember that the people who have skin in the game, who are affected most by this bill, are in opposition. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to first of all express my appreciation to the House leadership for my education in the past week on the nuances of water law in Colorado. A week ago, I wouldn't have spoken at all on this bill because I didn't know much about it. I would have trusted my friends and colleagues, Representative McNulty and Sonnenberg and Coram, Rankin, and the folks who are most affected by this bill. But thanks to your desire to have this bill receive its full and complete hearing in judiciary, where we understand these issues, I do now understand it. And what I came to understand was, first of all, this bill creates a new water right. But I also understand you can't create a new water right without taking someone else's water right. And it seems to me, this remains to be litigated, it seems to me that when you do that, since water is property, that you may well have engaged by this bill in an unconstitutional taking of someone's property, because there's certainly not any compensation. That is no small thing. Now, there certainly seems to be ways to accomplish this objective. As I listened to the testimony and have talked to various stakeholders, there seems to be a way to accomplish this objective that could avoid that or minimize that, and do so in such a way that it may not constitute an unconstitutional taking of someone's property without just compensation. But in order to do so, it takes some more work. And on second reading, we had multiple amendments, the purpose of which were to send this bill to an interim committee, to the Water Commission, to do a bit more work, because everyone shares the goal of water conservation in this state. But putting agribusiness out of business is not an acceptable way to do that. I, like Representative Coram, have no illusions about swaying a lot of votes here, but I do understand that from time to time in litigation, lawyers actually listen to these tapes and wonder if we understood what we were doing. Did anyone even talk about that? Did anyone even understand that? What did the General Assembly intend? And of course, I think that's dangerous, because there's 65 of us here and we probably intend at least 65 different things, or nothing at all. And so one has to rely on the words. But
I recognize this for what it is. However well intended, it is a taking of someone's property without just compensation. And for that reason, I would urge you, I would ask you to vote no. We can work through this problem. We can find the right way to do it. There are better minds than mine, certainly, about water and the nuances of water rights in Colorado that could certainly do that. It doesn't have to be now. The solution is there, but it takes some more work, and so I ask for a no vote.
Representative Rankin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind you that, you know, the eyes of Western Colorado really are on this vote. Actually, in conclusion, I want to ask you folks, do we really think the Agriculture Committee and this body is smarter than the 8th graders from Parachute, Colorado?
Representative Rankin, that'll be $5. Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I felt the need to come down because Aurora was specifically mentioned and why Aurora should hang together for this bill. I oppose this bill, and let me say why on. I mean, I opposed the comments, not the bill. But I know, wake up, it's morning. But here's the reason. On Aurora's when we were reached out by Aurora, I specifically asked, because the talking points that we received, the fact sheet that we received, never in all of that specifically states how it harms the city of Aurora. It talks about higher issues, about questions about, you know, all the unknowns, but never explains how it hurts the city of Aurora. I have 3 cities in my district. None of them came out and said they were opposed to this bill, and Denver supports this bill. Now to sit there and then I went back to Aurora and said, tell me specifically how this harms Aurora. I received no answer. I just want my fellow Aurorans who sit out here in this audience with me that I did not get a response. And to call Aurora out to say that we should not support this bill based on no fact is not okay with me. And I just wanted to share the information I have, and I rise in support of this bill. Thank you.
Representative Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative May. I can tell you exactly how Aurora can be affected by this bill. It's called Trans Mountain Diversions. Much of the water that is diverted from the western slope to the eastern slope are junior water rights. Junior water rights that if there's a call on the river, you will not be able to transfer that water. Unfortunately, I think we may be looking at a call on the river. Don't know. Hasn't happened yet. But with the growth going on in the lower basin states, a dry year here and there, that possibility does exist. So yes, Aurora, you can be affected because your junior rights, those 1923 rights, compact rights, certainly trump most, if not all, of the water rights that you have for the diversion. There's a few that are prior to that, but major portion of the 400,000 acre feet of water being diverted are junior water rights. You will be affected.
Representative Sain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wanted to add on to the excellent comments by Representative Quorum that all cities are in danger with this bill because the growth, especially on the eastern plains, the growth is such that we're not going to be able to meet our water needs. There's an M&I gap, and we know there's an M&I gap. So if the government has squatters' rights on this water on the western slope, we will never get that back. We will never get that back because nobody in their right mind is going to pull out those efficiencies to give us that water when we need it. So it doesn't just affect Aurora, it affects everyone. And that's why we're calling it theft, because it's theft from future generations. Even if there isn't a call now, there will be. Urge you no vote.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to address the issue of Aurora Water, I received this letter last week from Aurora Water stating that they oppose this bill, and they give quite a few reasons for their opposition. And I'll just read you a few of them. This proposed bill would represent a drastic change from current water law. The bill would let these water right owners control water they do not own or need. More specifically, here is some of the ways this bill is a huge change from current Colorado water law and a bad idea for water rights in this state. The bill lets certain water right owners sell or give away water they do not own. I think that's a key right there. It allows them to give away water they do not own. Violates the Colorado Constitution by denying others the right to appropriate. Rewards wasteful water users because an owner can take water back from the CWCB at any time simply by eliminating the efficiency measures. For example, the owner can sell off a center pivot equipment and declare efficiency measures over. Those are just a few of the reasons that Aurora Water gave for opposition to this bill, and I would ask members to keep that in mind as we vote on this. This is not supported by everyone associated with water in the state of Colorado, and Aurora Water has come out very clearly in opposition to this bill. Hearing this in judiciary, my take on this is that it does significantly change water law in Colorado. And we heard from opponents and proponents, but we also heard a lot that this discussion has gone on for years, and they have not come to a consensus on this. So I find it fascinating that this bill was given to the Judiciary Committee to make a final decision when in the 2 years that I've served on that committee, we have never heard a water bill. Which again, I think speaks volumes of the path this bill has taken, that it would go to a committee that has never heard a water bill. I would ask you to consider this very, very carefully because we are making significant changes in water law for Colorado and allowing people to give away water that they don't own. I would ask for a no vote on this bill.
Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's a lot that's been said about this bill that just isn't at all true. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to briefly address some key points. This bill simply gives irrigators incentive to conserve water without running the risk of abandoning that water. It's intended to help ag users, water users, and the environment, and it has significant associated economic benefits. It means that it is a purely voluntary bill. Only those ranchers or irrigators who want to do this will do it. And it will bring in other money to help improve their assets, assets that are quickly depreciating, like their ditches that were constructed 80, 100 years ago. It'll help make their system more resilient, help them reduce risk, help them with drought management. It does not steal anyone's water. It doesn't do that. Nothing in Colorado law prevents anyone from lining a ditch. And if you line a ditch, that's not stealing anyone's water. Anyone today can sell or donate their water to the CWCB for an in-stream flow. And when you do it, you are not stealing anyone's water. Folks raised issue about Lake Powell and Lake Mead and the interstate compacts. This bill does nothing. This bill has nothing to do with those issues whatsoever. Nothing. In fact, the bill explicitly states the change will not adversely affect Colorado's entitlements or obligations under interstate compacts or the United States Court equitable apportionment decrees. This bill has nothing to do with sending more water out of state or less water out of state. What I'm hearing today from my Republican colleagues are just general arguments against in-stream flows in general. Please know that many ranchers and irrigators and farmers support in-stream flows. This bill has the support of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, the Colorado Water Congress, Southwestern Water Conservation District, the Western Landowners Alliance, Water Quality and Quantity Committee of Northwest Council of Governments, the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District, the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District, as well as many environmental groups, including the Environmental Defense Fund, Nature Conservancy, and Trout Unlimited. This does not take any water out of the system, and it specifically states that injury cannot be caused to any user, and if it does, it cannot be implemented. It simply allows a rancher or irrigator, if he so chooses, to make improvements to his ditch, not lose his water right, and protect that water for short stretches of stream. That's it. It is not a new water right, it is a change of use. I could go on. I don't want to take up your time. I ask for your aye vote on Senate Bill 23.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought I was done debating this. Now I have to correct some things. It is voluntary for the person that wants to donate the conserved water. It is not voluntary for me to defend my water right and spend $100,000 to do so. That's what this boils down to. How does it affect Aurora? How does it affect every eastern or every city? When there is a water that has to be left in the stream, and then all of a sudden that right can't be moved across to the Front Range or down to Grand Junction, where are they coming after their water? Agriculture. Then it's buy and dry. Then it's buy and dry. The argument that it's not creating a new water right is just absolutely wrong. Yes, you can do in-stream flows now, so donate the water that you have right to that in-stream flow. Don't use somebody else's water, which you call a conserved water right, and donate that. That's like me coming to you and taking something off of your desk and donating it to somebody else. We are creating a new water right. We're creating a conserved water right. And the future of that conserved water right may be to absolutely eventually sell that conserved water right, which is somebody else's water. We have a prior appropriation system that allocates that water. Yes, you can line a ditch. You line a ditch now, that water that is saved is back in the system. It's not donated someplace else. It's not given to somebody else. It's not sold to somebody else because it's not their water. Members, I'm sorry. I'm so passionate about this because I know the effects on agriculture. To defend, yes, it's an opportunity for someone to donate a water right. It's an opportunity for one person. It's not mandatory. But the fact of the matter is, members, it then becomes mandatory for the other farmers and ranchers to spend that money to defend their water. Money that most ag options don't have. I have the utmost respect for Representative Becker and what she's trying to do. But ladies and gentlemen, what this does is creates a huge hardship for agriculture to defend its water when someone else wants to donate those people's water to an in-stream flow. Obviously, members, this has had a huge impact on the debate. You have heard hours and hours and hours of debate. I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, don't make agriculture again go and try to defend what is already theirs, that they're not going to be damaged, to spend that money, that they're not going to be damaged, because the key is, members, this water leaves the system. This water goes to an in-stream flow run by CWCB unless agriculture spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on engineers and lawyers to defend and prove that this water right will damage them. That's the key. I beg a no vote. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 23 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Schaefer. Close the machine. With 35 aye votes, 30 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 23 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 2.
Senate Bill 2 by Senators Carroll and Cabinet, also Representatives Ferrandino and Del Grosso, concerning transferring the Safe to Tell program to the Department of Law in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 2 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 2 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 2 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 5.
Senate Bill 5 by Senator Ulibarri, also Representative Singer, concerning alternative administrative remedies for the processing of certain wage claims in connection with amending the provisions for written notices of wage claim in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 5 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 5 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives McNulty and Singer, close the machine. With 38 aye votes, 27 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 5 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 12.
Senate Bill 12 by Senator Kaffalas, also Representative Exum, concerning increasing the assistance payment for the program for the aid to needy disabled in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 12 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 12 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti and Nordberg. Close the machine. With 47 aye votes, 18 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 12 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 99.
Senate Bill 99 by Senator Hodge, also Representative May, concerning a provisional physical therapist license in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 99 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 99 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 99 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 155.
Senate Bill 155 by Senator Stebbins, also Representatives May and Duran, concerning grant funding for medical marijuana health effect studies.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 155 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 155 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Court, Fisher, McLaughlin, and Navarro. Close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 5 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 155 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 179.
Senate Bill 179 by Senators Nicholson and Renfro, also Representatives Foote and Sonnenberg, concerning the creation of flood debris cleanup grant account to facilitate watershed cleanup efforts in areas affected by the September 2013 flood in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 179 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 179 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Lee. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 3 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 179 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 203.
Senate Bill 203 by Senators Lambert and Newell, also Representatives May and Gardner, concerning the Office of the Respondent Parents Council in late cases of alleged child abuse or neglect.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 203 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 203 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members please vote. Representatives Buck, Pabon, Lee, McLaughlin, and McNulty. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 203 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 188.
Senate Bill 188 by Senator Schwartz and Baumgartner, also Representatives Fisher and Rankin, concerning measures to effectuate the conservation of native species of Colorado in connection with making appropriations from the Species Conservation Trust Fund for purposes recommended by the Department of Natural Resources.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 188 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 188 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Gardner, Landgraf. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 3 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 188 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 159.
Senate Bill 159 by Senator Aguilar, also Representative Primavera, concerning implementation of standardized rules for use and processing medical claims in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 159 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 159 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti, Humphrey, and Stevens. Close the machine with 49 aye votes, 16 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 159 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 3.
Senate Bill 3 by Senator Nicholson, also Representative Pedersen, concerning child care assistance for working families in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 3 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 3 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Gardner, Murray, and Waller. Close the machine with 42 aye votes, 23 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 3 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 190.
Senate Bill 190 by Senator Lambert, also Representative Giroux, concerning criminal discovery in connection with creating a statewide discovery sharing system and criminal discovery surcharge, civil immunity for district attorneys to make good faith effort to redact information from discovery documents and making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 190 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 190 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buckner, Gardner, and McNulty. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 190 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 210.
Senate Bill 210 by Senators Cabinet Aguilar, also Representative Sonnenberg and Kraft Tharp, concerning the conduct of examinations of insurers by the Commissioner of Insurance in connection with requiring a pre-examination conference and the conference to be held before issuance of a draft examination report.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 210 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 210 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Lepsock, McNulty, and Stevens. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 210 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 201.
Senate Bill 201 by Senator Newell, also Representative Singer, concerning reestablishing a Child Protection Ombudsman Advisory Work Group to develop a plan for accountable autonomy for the Child Protection Ombudsman Program.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 201 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 201 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti, Del Grosso, Gardner, McNulty, Priola, and Szabo. Close the machine. With 54 aye votes, 11 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 201 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 14.
Senate Bill 14 by Senator Kafalis, also Representative Pedersen, concerning the property-related expense assistance grants for low-income seniors and individuals with disabilities in connection with making and reducing appropriation.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 14 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 14 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buck, Gardner, McNulty, and Szabo. Close the machine with 38 aye votes, 37 aye votes, 28 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 14 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 124.
Senate Bill 124 by Senator Zenzinger, also Representative Fields, concerning programs to develop leaders for low-performing public schools in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 124 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is to pass Senate Bill 124 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Kraft Art. Close the machine with 37 aye votes, 28 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 124 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 192.
Senate Bill 192 by Senator Hodge, also Representatives Becker and Wright, concerning the regulation of facilities license with regard to classified radioactive materials in connection with making appropriation.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is to pass Senate Bill 192 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Oh. You didn't move it. Sorry, I just it totally phased out. Madam Majority Leader, why don't you move the bill before we can vote?
Do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is practically the only mistake I've seen you make.
I've made some others.
Years. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Senate Bill 192 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, this is a bill that has brought a great deal of discussion. The bill that came out of the Senate, I was in favor of. I said I would give my support with one change made, and that's putting a date certain on the permitting. But that didn't happen. Didn't happen. Members, let me tell you what 192 does. First of all, it takes and puts borehole mining abolition as a milling process. We have heard Representative Wright say that there was letters of concern coming from the NRC. Well, on that point, he's absolutely correct. What NRC said, one, borehole mining is not milling. It is not milling. It will probably require a source material license once the material reaches the top of the ground. But borehole mining itself is not milling. This is in a direct controversy with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Colorado's agreement is that they will comply with all rules and regulations of the NRC. This bill puts our agreement out of compliance. The abolition also is not milling. NRC has said so. Once again, we are out of compliance with the agreement, the state of Colorado, radiation control, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the agreement that they have. I ran an amendment, said Colorado Department of Health was okay with. They have the right now. You don't even need this legislation for Colorado Department of Health to control this. I don't think there's anybody in this room that is happy with what the situation happened in Canyon City. But fear is not a tool to use to do the right thing. The right thing to do here is to vote no on this bill and let the Colorado Department of Health, Division of Mining Safety and Reclamation, the NRC, determine what is proper here. What this bill does is goes far beyond the intended consequences of cleaning up Cotter. What this bill does says effectively that we will shut down the uranium industry in Colorado. With that, you also shut down the vanadium industry in Colorado, because those two are in the same formations in the Uravan Mineral Belt. This destroys jobs. Between the two, there's about $5.5 billion worth of resources in that region. It's unnecessary. This bill is unnecessary to protect the water rights, the citizens of the Canyon City area. We talk about the war on rural Colorado. Members, this is a war on rural Colorado. This product on the Uravan Mineral Belt is their only option for jobs. With this bill, that option is lost. We use the fear of radiation to say no. 3 Mile Island was an example of the system working properly. Not one life was lost. The most recent, Fukushima, Japan. The fear was hundreds were going to die. This is devastating. Not one single life was lost. Not one single life. Fukushima was a result of, I hate to say this, but architectural design and engineering. It was a failure that when you put your generation system and your fuel supply so you can keep those generators going, keep it cooled down, it was a failure to put those in the basement. Once the water came over the seawall, it was all lost. Members, fear is something that we should not operate on. Let's use facts instead of fear. If you want an F word, use facts, because that's what we need to deal in. Facts and science. Facts, science, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Colorado Department of Health, Division of Mining Safety. They are the authorities in this. The 65 raw amateurs in this room are going to put something into legislation that, yes, Colorado Department of Health, CDHPE, will comply with should the governor sign this. But in doing so, you're also destroying the future, the hopes and dreams of an entire region of the Uravan Mineral Belt. Minerals, that district is already gravely affected. We're talking about an issue of national safety. Do you realize that there are over 430 reactors in the world right now? 109 of those are in the United States. 20% of the electricity that you use comes from nuclear power. Another 40% comes from coal. I told the oil and gas industry earlier this year, beware. Uranium industry was the first target. Coal is the second target. You are the third. Absolutely, you are the third.
Let's talk about this bill, Representative Corum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe I am talking about this bill, because what this bill does, it affects the ability to provide jobs, to provide a resource, to save a way of life for rural Colorado. There is no doubt I am talking about that, because those are the people that are affected. We have an option here. The option is to vote no and give the trained professionals that we pay to do the job, to protect us, and do the right thing. The whole life of the communities that I'm talking about in the Uravan Mineral Belt are at stake. That community saved this nation a great deal. From the 40s, when the U.S. government started the uranium program in the Uravan Mineral Belt, before that, it was strictly vanadium. Vanadium was a byproduct, or uranium was a byproduct. The United States government sought that in order to save the free world, this was a project that they had to put fast and forward, and they made mistakes. They did mining that was left scars on the land. I know a little bit about that. I do environmental remediation. I know about that. I know what we have done in the past is wrong. But members, what you are doing here today, you are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You are saying, I know better than the people who live there, whose generations have been there for 100 years. You're telling them that, frankly, we don't care about what you need. Our fear is far more important than the facts that you bring us. Members, this is a bad bill for rural Colorado. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise in strong support of Senate Bill 192. I didn't get a chance to speak about this bill on second reading, but in committee, hearing the stories from the families and folks in Canyon City really hit close to home. As someone that lives less than a mile from a Superfund site, it brought back a lot of memories and a lot of experiences that the people in my community in Commerce City went through. And what we need to recognize is that when people's land, water, or air is contaminated, government and businesses alike have an irrefutable responsibility to make good on that commitment, to remediate those resources to a condition before we damage them. We have a responsibility. Thank you, Representative Wright and Representative Becker, for carrying a bill to fulfill that responsibility.
Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise this morning to ask you to consider what makes us Colorado. It's our mountains, it's our beautiful natural surroundings, it's our rivers and streams, it's our diversity of citizens in this state. That's what Senate Bill 192 is about. This bill is about protecting our citizens, those who we all are here today to serve. Colleagues, I ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 192. Now, I don't take to running this kind of legislation lightly. Many would be surprised that a Republican is on this type of legislation. But trust me, as a lifelong Coloradan, I've seen plenty of direct impacts, many of them negative, from decisions that were made by members of this body that came before us. And I can tell you that I am confident that a decision to vote yes on this bill today will not be one of those negative impacts. The fact is, members, today, if we continue with our current management scheme of uranium extraction unfettered, we will see more of the same. More contamination of private property owners' wells, of our water supply, and more unnecessary environmental damage to Colorado. Members, this bill is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's making sure that the bathwater is not contaminated in the first place. Now, I don't know about you, but frankly, I'm certain that there will be no jobs in the communities where these extraction operations take place if we've contaminated their surroundings. Members, I'm shocked by the lack of logic in saying that SB 192 will kill jobs in rural communities. I represent rural communities. This policy is about careful prevention. It's common sense. Every time a new technology has been developed in the history of uranium extraction in this state, such as in situ leach, we in government were told that it was safe and new and improved and would result in little to no contamination. And yet, guess what? It resulted in devastating contamination, depending on its use in areas of this state. And if you don't believe me, just ask the people with contaminated groundwater wells who came to testify in front of our committees. Members, it is common sense that we would want this new experimental technology to be properly vetted and issued a license before it begins extracting uranium or vanadium for that matter, because members, vanadium has only been discovered to occur with uranium, a radioactive element. Properly vetted, not banned, not blockaded, but allowed to move forward in a reasonable, thoughtful, and safe manner. Now, we keep hearing from opponents to this bill about how we should let the experts be involved in this process. Well, that is exactly what this bill does. It allows the experts at CDPHE to be involved in the process. Now, we have a letter from NRC, and I'm not refuting that there are experts at NRC, but the letter simply says that they don't believe it's milling. They don't know what the process is. That's the dispute. They don't know what to call it. I have a letter from the Mining Safety and Health Administration where they clearly and explicitly say that the UBHM and ablation process is similar to in situ uranium leaching because both processes inject a water or chemical solution underground, which separates a valuable mineral from other mineral deposits. Therefore, it is not mining, and they don't have the ability to regulate it. So we have the Mining Administration saying that they know it's not mining, and we have NRC saying it's not milling. So the question is, what is it? That is why we're asking the experts at a department that has been given authority by us in Colorado to regulate radioactive waste, to issue their professional observations on this technology in the form of a license after being thoroughly tested and vetted in a public, transparent process. Now, members, why would we want to wait until the next contamination in this state to decide that maybe we should vet this process? We're talking about real people. We're talking about the citizens that we came here to serve. If we want to talk about fear-mongering, let's talk about the statement that we're shutting down these rural communities. Simply not true. What we're telling these mining operations is that they should have to go get the same type of license that others have to get in similar forms of uranium extraction. Members, we're talking about a very real danger here, not just to people's health and safety, but to fiscal policy in this state. This state, Colorado, has a past of billions of dollars in costs for the cleanup of contaminated groundwater, contaminated surroundings to these operations. And that's not to mention the costly litigation that this could cost the taxpayers of the state of Colorado if we're simply not making the careful decision. Members, I ask you to consider who we're here to serve. Everyone in the state of Colorado, whether that's the business owner of these mining operations, which I respect, by the way, or it's the people that live next door to the operation who have groundwater wells. We're here for all of them. This is a balanced piece of legislation for that reason. I believe in this bill, and I would ask you respectfully for a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Quorum, just a note, you do have 8 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will use my 8 seconds very quick. My young colleague is so knowledgeable about what is not true.
Okay. And seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 192 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Everett and McNulty. Close the machine with 42 aye votes, 23 no, with 43 aye votes, 22 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 192 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 197.
Senate Bill 197 by Senators Jones and Herpin, also Representatives Foot and Kraft Tharp, concerning high-performance transportation enterprise transparency.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 197 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask to take a 21C on this bill.
Under House Rule 21C, Representative Lawrence will be excused from votes on Senate Bill 197. There we go. It just took me a little while, Representative Lawrence. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take never mind.
You're more than welcome to if you want, but why don't you go and speak about why you're opposed to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Senate Bill 197 is a very concerning bill to a lot of the county commissioners that I've talked with. It's very concerning for a lot of different reasons that I won't take a tremendous amount of time to talk about. The primary thing that I think that struck me in our committee hearing was the commissioners, the contractors, and all the folks that came down to testify against the concept of what was being proposed in 197. Transparency, yes. Absolute control, no. We have a group of people that are very, very good at what they do, called CDOT. We have commissions that do a great job of looking over these programs and these processes and do an incredibly good job. In this particular case with Highway 36, it's become kind of this political ping pong ball that's been bouncing around ever since this broke, or this story broke back 6 months ago, or whenever that exact date was. I just remember I was actually looking at Highway 36 the day that the news story broke. And this became this incredible discussion about transparency and that people were not informed and they had no idea what was going on, and the 50-year contract, and it's a foreign investment company, and oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I hear all that. And I also hear the taxpayers of the state of Colorado saying, no, we do not have an appetite for a tax increase of any kind. And as we all know, there's been things out there on education. Ideas were floated all summer on a gas tax increase. Ideas were floated on a tax of some type to pay for transportation, roads, infrastructure. And the voters have been very, very clear that figured out, balance your budget, state legislature, and get it done. But yet, because of things like Highway 36, we've gotten somewhat of a black eye. Well, I guess I shouldn't say we got a black eye. The folks that passed faster got a black eye.
Representative Scott, this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But being a part of 197 is a part of faster, so I apologize if that hits a chord with anybody. But the fact of the matter is that because of that prior legislation, we now find ourselves in a position of trying to cover our tracks, so to speak, or trying to make the general public happy with a Band-Aid. Now, we all have town hall meetings, we all have meetings with our constituents, and we talk about some of these issues. Were mistakes made in this process of having hearings? I would say yes, obviously. Some folks didn't find out about it. But I don't know that other than putting up a blimp and giving out free hot dogs if you're going to get a big crowd anywhere to talk about any particular issue, let alone a highway. As we find out in this political arena, you have a very small group of people that get involved in these things. But to go out and try to fix it with a piece of legislation that actually brings in more political fire, so to speak, into the mix, just seems to be the wrong way to go. Transparency, yes. Control, no. We have plenty of controls within our state statutes on these programs. The 3P system, as we call it, is something we went to several years ago. Makes sense. A lot of states are doing it. A lot of countries are doing different things like this. And yes, I think it is a path to the future as far as transportation concerns are out there. But to pick out this particular project at this particular time and say because past legislatures made a mistake, we now have to have another bill on top of this bill to fix it. That's just the wrong thing to do from a policy standpoint. Again, because of that prior legislation, people all over the state of Colorado have a lot of questions, excuse me, about how we are funding highway projects. And I'm sure you're going to hear from my colleagues here in a moment about how horrific all the highways are in Colorado and that we have to figure out ways to do these things. And yes, that's true. So if we need transparency, yes, I get that. We do need to have transparency in these projects, in the contracts, so that our constituents understand exactly what's going on. And if they don't like something, they can weigh in. But to bring anything back to the legislature, I think is very, very dangerous from the standpoint of you already passed one piece of legislation to do exactly what we're doing. But to turn around and say it's a bad piece of legislation now by trying to pass something else on top of that, that's a very slippery slope that we're about to get ourselves on. Very slippery. That means that we're going to have to look at all types of legislation that are passed in this chamber and start asking ourselves questions about, well, gosh, the public's upset about this, so now we have to make a change. The public's upset about that, so now we have to make a change. Transportation issues are incredibly difficult, colleagues, very, very difficult. I believe this commission did the best they possibly could under the circumstances and with the sideboards that they were given. Do we need to take a new look at that? Sure. I totally agree. However, is 197 the right way to go? Now I suspect it's going to pass just as my colleagues would like it to pass. But again, I have to say that in 2009, mistakes were made. And now 197 is just a cover for those mistakes. And I find that very disheartening that we're going down that trail. I would ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 197.
Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to be very short and say, you know, we've got to do good P3s for expansion of capacity in Colorado. Good public-private partnerships. I was pretty amazed at all the letters and the emails I got on this, and I think people don't understand what it's all about. And I think that transparency is really important. And I think when the people and the voters in my district tell me they have a strong concern here, I need to follow the voters in my district to say we need something, a process that's more transparent, more open to the public, and some guardrails around this to make it happen. We often pass bills and then the session comes back and we do some fixes. As a matter of fact, we did a fix this session. I had a constituent come to me Saturday and say, we need another little fix there. I asked for a late bill. I didn't get one, I guess, on this. But I will tell you, this is a good bill. Helps the public understand what we need to do to get expanded capacity in Colorado. I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to spend just a few moments, not too much time, hopefully, talking a little bit about the process around this bill. And I think and I hope that once I get done speaking about it, you'll see the exact reason why we have to have this bill. Because this bill wasn't just thrown out there after a night at the bar and writing it on the back of a cocktail napkin. This was something that one of the Senate sponsors actually had been working on since April of 2013. And many of us also got involved very heavily a number of months ago. And that also includes the folks that know a lot about what it takes to build roads, and even those that are under public-private partnerships, CDOT and the High Performance Transportation Enterprise, HPTE. So the bill was released after a lot of discussions and many, many drafts of the bill. And after that, several groups came forward to express their concerns, and several amendments were made in the Senate, 6, as a matter of fact, second reading on the Senate floor. 2 of those groups, the contractors and also the financiers of these types of projects, said that these amendments that were offered and accepted on the Senate floor would address their concerns and they would become neutral. Now, that doesn't mean they were particularly enamored with the bill. As we all know, that neutral doesn't mean support, but it means they could live with it, that it wasn't going to cause undue concern. That's pretty much what happens down here when we're dealing with organizations that go neutral, and that was the same thing with them. Then, late last week, neutral became opposed. And what they could live with just a couple of days before meant suddenly the end of public-private partnerships here in Colorado. So what changed? Well, it wasn't the bill. Nothing changed in the bill. It remained the same as it passed out of the Senate with all of those amendments. It remained the same that garnered strong bipartisan support in the Senate. What changed was those out-of-state financiers that came here who suddenly decided they didn't want any kind of legislative check and balance at all on these public-private partnerships. They didn't want it. They wanted it all out. In fact, they wanted a third bite at the apple, maybe even a fourth bite at the apple at this point, and decided to do an end around. They were, as it turns out, okay with telling us what happened after the fact and informing the public what happened after the fact. But they didn't really want anyone asking questions as the deal was being done. And I guess, as you know, that makes some sense from their perspective. Dealing with the legislature is not the easiest process, as we all know. These out-of-state financiers, they're not accountable to the public. They're accountable to their shareholders, and that's how it should be. But they're not like us. They're not accountable to the public. And again, we're not talking about a private deal here. We're talking about a public-private partnership. As legislators, we're accountable to the public. We represent the public. They aren't. We're the ones that have to take the questions. We're the ones who are accountable. We're the ones that have to take their complaints if there are any. And that's exactly how it went down during the US 36 controversy. CDOT and members of the High Performance Transportation Enterprise were virtual punching bags at some of those meetings. Us legislators in that area had a lot of people express concerns on the phone, emails, at town halls. Those financiers were nowhere to be found when we were dealing with those questions. They were sitting in their office in LA, Sydney, Vancouver, wherever they were at the moment. They weren't here dealing with what they had done. We were. At any rate, once those financiers attempted their end around, suddenly a number of business interests in cities became equally concerned, they said, that this would be the end of public-private partnerships in Colorado as we know it. So they brought people out to lobby. The contractors, the subcontractors, sand and gravel, various business groups, the cities. They came out to lobby everybody to take out any kind of legislative check and balance to these public-private partnerships. But when you sit back and think about it and reflect upon it like I did, I guess unfortunately over the weekend, you might notice something interesting. All those people that were lobbying to get rid of the legislative check and balance were people that stood to make money off these deals. Not represented in the lobby were people that had to pay money to make these deals happen, and that's the general public. That's because, members, we are the representatives of the public. They're supposed to have us stand up for them. It's our job to ask questions. It's our job to provide the check and balance. And we can't do that if we're cut out of the process. So I ask you, members, to stand up to what we're supposed to do as a legislative body. Stand up for the public and make sure to have a voice. We need to put the public back into these public-private partnerships. And I ask you to pass this bill so future public-private partnerships, this won't have anything to do with 36, but future public-private partnerships can have what the US 36 deal didn't, which is support from the public. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I've heard a lot of, I guess I'm going to call it CYA. We all know what that means. Transparency is a check and balance. That's where I'm getting very confused. If you have transparency where people can see what you are doing and can ask questions about what you are doing, that's transparency. Legislative oversight is called control. So we want our cake and eat it too now. Some people get upset over a highway project, and now we are going to scramble to try to make them happy by giving them their cake and eat it too. You want transparency, you got it. You want the legislature to come down and deal with all those intricate details that have already been taken care of, by the way, because that's why we have CDOT. We might as well eliminate them as well, because now we're highway funding experts. That makes absolutely no sense to me. You know, the idea that this bill was being written because of incredible amounts of thought and process. I'm sorry, folks, but this was written because of public pressure. The public came down on top of people involved in the 36 project like a ton of bricks. Because guess what? They passed legislation in 2009 that wasn't correct. That's the reason they came down on it. If you had all this wisdom, you should have taken care of that in 2009. Transparency is what people are asking for. Transparency is what their need is. But to act as if we are protecting the general public in some way that just is mystical to me doesn't even make sense within this bill. I would hope that common sense prevails here when we say transparency, we're doing what we're supposed to do. We go through the entire summer of meetings discussing different transportation issues around the state of Colorado. The general public is more than welcome. I don't believe the chair has ever thrown anybody out of a meeting and said, you know what, we're talking about Highway 24 here, we really don't want you around. That doesn't happen.
Representative Scott, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge a no vote on 197.
Representative, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I don't want to put words in Representative Scott's mouth, but I think he was talking about how bizarre this session is that you actually have Republicans down here defending the governor and a department of government down here. But I think the problem with bringing these contracts into the legislature and having us all debate, gosh, we're elected officials. We should be able to see and go through this process. But by
implementing this bill, you're going to make building a road political. Building a road and meeting the transportation needs of the people of Colorado should not be a political fight. You're going to bring it in here and the 65 of us are going to argue about, well, this contractor or this group of people gave to these people gave to these people, and whatever. Well, I don't like this group, I don't like this group, and it's going to make this a massive political battle over building a road. Building a road and meeting those transportation needs should not be political. We have a system now that can go and look at these contracts and can make those decisions. And if all this did was ramp up a couple of extra meetings like what part of the bill does, then that would probably be okay. But it's the problem that it actually brings those contracts into the legislature and then lets us debate those contracts. That is a problem. We will never get our transportation needs met in the state of Colorado if something like this passes. That is why I urge a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Representative Del Grosso. I just want to clarify, this bill does not bring contracts into the legislative process. This bill brings three components in the request for proposal that are extraordinary to the legislative process for that check and balance system. I just want to say I heard from I heard from many constituents this weekend. Two constituents I want to bring here to the floor. One said to me, this bill helps bring confidence to us about the use of our taxpayer dollars, about the use of the public partnership in these transactions. The second said to me, there are those that like the private partnership with public assets, but don't like the public transparency and check and balance of the public-private partnership. That's all we're asking for. Let's bring the public into this. Thank you. Vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 197 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buckner, Corum, Gardner, Giroux, Kraft-Tharp, Hamner, Primavera, and Szabo. Representative Buckner. Close the machine. With 35 aye votes, 29 no votes, 1 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 197 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 180. Senate Bill 180 by Senator Cafalas, also Representative Swam, concerning the Colorado Dental Health Care Program for low-income seniors in connection with requiring a post-enactment review of the implementation of this act and making and reducing appropriations. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 180 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 180 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. The members proceed to vote. Representatives Becker, Fields, Joshi, Priola, and Vigil. Representative Priola and Vigil. Priola. Now Vigil. Close the machine. With 57 aye votes, 8 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 180 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. The Senate did not concur in House amendments to Senate Bill 50 and asked a conference committee be formed.
Conferees on Senate Bill 50 will be Representative Moreno, Representative McCann, and Representative Landgraf. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House proceed out of order for consideration of Senate amendments to House bills.
Seeing no objection, the House will proceed out of order for consideration of Senate amendments to House bills. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1334.
House Bill 1334 by Representatives Hamner and Scott, also Senators John and King, concerning the Petroleum Cleanup and Redevelopment Fund.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1334.
Please explain what the Senate did.
Is that okay with you? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate added a provision that the General Assembly would be appropriating from the fund on an annual basis, or that it would need to be approved by the General Assembly on an annual basis. Did I get that right?
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I concur with Representative Hamner.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendment to House Bill 1334. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Becker, Kraft Tharp, Pabon, Priola, McCann, and Moreno. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1334. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1334 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1334 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members, please vote. Representative Navarro, close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 10 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 1334 as amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over House Bill 1161 to the end of the calendar.
Seeing no objection, House Bill 1161 will be laid over to the end of the calendar. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1066.
House Bill 1066 by Representative Vigil, also Senator Stedman, concerning the amount of a driver's license fee that a rural county clerk and recorder may retain when issuing a driver's license in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Representative Vigil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur with, move House Bill 1066 and concur with the Senate amendments.
Okay. Please explain what the Senate did.
What the Senate did was they just did some technical amendments to harmonize 1066 with other Department of Revenue bills, make sure that they were compatible, and that's all the Senate did.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Giroux?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Vigil, I'm just curious, and I'm really sorry. Senate Bill 194, it says that new effective section date depended on whether Senate Bill 194 passes or fails. Do you recall what that part of the Senate amendments did? I apologize.
Representative Vigil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, I do not, but from my understanding of my conversation with Senator Stedman was that he was taking care of it and that I need to worry about it and that it's taken care of. So that's my conversations with the Senate.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1066. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1066. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for repassage of House Bill 1066 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1066 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Williams. Close the machine with 65 aye votes, 0 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 1066 as amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1156.
House Bill 1156, by Representative Moreno, also Senator Ulibarri, concerning extending the age of eligibility for the Child Nutrition School Lunch Protection Program in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1156.
Please explain what the Senate did.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Senate made a small change to House Bill 1156. They eliminated the .2 FTE allocation to the Department of Education. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is a concurrent Senate amendment to House Bill 1156. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Gardner. Close the machine. With 44 aye votes, 21 votes who want to give more staff to CDE, 0 excused, and 0 absent, the House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1156. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of House Bill 1156 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1156 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Waller. Close the machine with 39 aye votes, 26 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1156 is repassed as amended. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to House Bill 1214.
House Bill 1214, by Representative Jarrell, Senator Balmer, concerning increase in the penalties for certain offenses committed against an emergency medical service provider in connection with making an appropriation.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I ask that we concur with Senate amendments for House Bill 1214.
Please explain what the Senate did.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know, do you guys have a tire that just went flat over here? There was a very small sound. Members, what the Senate did, I'll just be honest with you, the problem that the bill had with a lot of members on this side of the aisle, or on this side of the aisle, in the House had to do with mandatory sentencing. And so what the Senate did was the President of the Senate sat down with the bill sponsor over there and said that the Senate amendments would include a study of efficacy of the implemented enhanced sentencing for EMS providers. In other words, there's some concern about mandatory sentencing, and I think it's something that is probably a greater question that needs to be dealt with beyond this bill. It's an issue in a lot of ways for a lot of people. So what I asked for is permission to concur with House Bill 1214. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House concurrent Senate amendments to House Bill 1214. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Del Grosso, Moreno, Stevens, and Giroux. Closed machine with 64 aye votes, 1 no vote, 0 excused, and 0 absent. The House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1214. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1214 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the repassage of House Bill 1214 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Priola. Close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 10 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, the House repasses House Bill 1214 as amended. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House. Oh, co-sponsors. Thank you, Mr. Kohler.
Sorry.
The Majority Leader was distracting
I was
me.
distracting him. I apologize.
Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1276.
House Bill 1276 by Representative Primavera, also Senator Hodge, concerning instruction in cardiopulmonary resuscitation in public schools and in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Representative Primavera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 1276.
Please explain what they did.
Okay, these were mostly at the urging of the minority leader in the Senate, Senator Cadman. He had a situation where high school coaches saved the lives of a couple of their players on their teams. So in the legislative declaration, he wanted to add in information about how important it is that high school coaches also be trained in CPR and AED. And then part of the grant money will go to train high school coaches and staff in addition to the students. So I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1276. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Hollinghorse. Close the machine with 50 aye votes, 15 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. The House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1276. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1276 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the repassage of House Bill 1276 is amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative McNulty. Close the machine with 41 aye votes, 24 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1276 is amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of the House Bill 1283.
House Bill 1283, Representative McCann, also Senators Newell and Gonzalez, concerning modifications to the electronic prescription drug monitoring program in connection with making appropriation.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House concur in the recommendations, the amendments from the Senate.
Please explain what they did.
Well, I actually don't particularly like what they did, but in the interest of getting this bill passed, I would ask us to concur. What they did is add when a provider is going to be held responsible for his or her designee's access to the prescription drug monitoring program, they will only be held liable if it's negligent breach of confidentiality versus just any breach of confidentiality. So they added the word negligent. They also removed access by HCPF to the prescription drug monitoring program. They simply took that entire provision out. So HCPF will not have access to the PDMP, which I think is unfortunate, but I would still ask that we concur in these amendments.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 1283. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Buckner, Gardner. Close the machine with 55 aye votes, 10 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. The House concurs in Senate amendments to House Bill 1283. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1283 as amended.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the repassage of House Bill 1283 is amended. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti, Hollinghorse, and Navarro. Close the machine with 42 aye votes, 23 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent. House Bill 1283 as amended is repassed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1352.
House Bill 1352, Representatives Tyler and Quorum, also Senators Todd and King, concerning the management of waste tires in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Really? Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to have my co-sponsor down here. I move we concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 1352, particularly since two reasons. One, it helps an innovative way of getting rid of these darn tires, and two, we wrote the amendment to send it over to the Senate.
Representative Quorum?
Enough said.
Representative Giroux?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, why are we spending another $500,000 on waste tires? I mean, that's what you're doing here.
Representative Tyler.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. You know what we're doing is we're phasing out the subsidy and we're cutting back the fee that's happening as of 1/1/18.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what you just described, Representative Tyler, is it now becomes a general fund issue, because if you're cutting back the subsidy and you're lowering the fee, then where do the dollars come from, this $500,000 that we're going to be putting in? I mean, I'm all about recycling, but why are we doing this?
Representative Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would speak directly to the amendment, and the amendment is there to make sure that end users get the subsidies to make sure we get rid of these tires. Comes out of the fund. It comes out of exclusively. It comes out of the waste tire fee, and I guess that's all I need to say, because I'm going to just speak to the amendment that was made in the Senate.
Representative Giroux, you've already spoken, or is this your second?
This will be my second time, Mr.
Actually, this is your third time, Representative
Oh, then
Giroux.
I should go away?
I'm sorry, Representative Giroux.
That's what you've been saying, so I will.
Can we,
Why don't
we just lay it over?
we do that just for a second? I just want to
We can lay it over until tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Lay it over today, maybe Thursday.
Representative, or Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over House Bill 1352 to the end of the calendar.
Seeing no objection, I really was hoping this would be my last vote or last day to deal with waste tires in my career, but we'll deal with it tomorrow. House Bill 1352 will be laid over till the end of the calendar. The end of the calendar. Representative Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we appointed a conference committee on Senate Bill 50. I request permission to go beyond the scope of differences between the two houses.
Please explain why.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the reason we need to go beyond the scope is the very small technical one-word change that we need to make is in a section of the bill that was never amended by the House. It stayed as it was from the Senate, and so for that reason we have to request permission to go beyond the scope.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the House is to grant the Conference Committee on Senate Bill 50 permission to go beyond the scope. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 43 aye votes, 22 no votes, 0 excused, and 0 absent, the Conference Committee on Senate Bill 50 has provided permission to go beyond the scope. Announcements and introductions. Actually, before we do that, message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, the Senate has passed on. Remainder of the message from that useless and pointless and waste of space body will be printed in the journal. Message from the reviser. We're here with Remainder of the message from our amazing reviser will be printed in the journal. Let's do introduction of bills. They're right there, Mr. Kohler. Right there. Senate Bill 213 by Senator Johnston, also Representative Conti, concerning increasing the statutes of limitations for commencing proceedings against a person who, after committing a vehicular homicide, leaves the scene of the accident, and in connection with requiring post-enactment review of the implementation of this act.
Senate Bill 213 assigned to the Committee on Judiciary.
Senate Bill 202 by Senator Kerr, also Representative Tyler, concerning modifications to the requirements applicable to the School Energy Loan Program.
Senate Bill 202 assigned to the Committee on Business, Labor and Economic and Workforce Development.
They're already written on. Okay. I didn't.
Senate Bill 217 by Senators Carroll and Cadman, also Representatives Hollinghorst and Del Grosso, concerning methods to promote transparency in connection with public disclosure by lobbyists in connection with making appropriation.
Senate Bill 217 assigned to the Committee on Business, Labor, Economic and Workforce Development.
Senate Bill 221 by Senators Kerr and Zenzinger, also Representatives Hamner and Young, concerning reducing the frequency of administering the statewide assessment in social studies in connection with reducing an appropriation.
Senate Bill 221 assigned to the Committee on Education and will be heard later today.
Senate Bill 223 by Senators Nicholson and Cadman, also Representatives Giroux and Young, concerning the payment by the state of legal claims arising in connection with the Lower Norfolk wildfire in connection with making reducing appropriations.
Senate Bill 223 assigned to the Committee on Judiciary.
Senate Bill 215 by Senator Stebbins, also Representatives Duran and Giroux, concerning the disposition of monies collected by the state in connection with the legal marijuana industry in connection with making appropriation.
Senate Bill 215 assigned to the Committee on Health Insurance and Environment. Members, I believe these are the last bills to be introduced for the year, or at least to come over. Announcements and introductions. Representative Court.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reminded you last week that you need to clean your desks out in the chamber. Your offices are a different discussion, but your desks in the chamber, by Wednesday, the assignables will have a stack of box tops into which, congratulations, Representative Giroux, into which you can put all your stuff. But anything left in your chamber desk as of sine die is gone. It's going to get chucked. So if you want what's in your desk, pack it up and take it. The assignables will handle your file cabinets, but the desk itself is your responsibility. There will be box tops for you to put the stuff in. By sine die, it must be done. Thank you.
Representative Coram.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if my good friend and colleague, Representative Court, made that clear as a bell, but I think what she was trying to say in her gruff voice is, Wednesday night, make sure your doors are clean.
Who wants to follow that? Representative Kagan.
I'm just going to ignore that comment.
Sounds like a good plan.
Members of the Judiciary Committee, you've just heard that two bills have been introduced and referred to the Judiciary Committee. They are Senate Bill 213 and Senate Bill 223. We will be convening tomorrow morning upon adjournment for the Judiciary Committee to hear Senate Bills 213 and Senate Bill 223. Be there or be square.
Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of Health Insurance and Environment, we also just got assigned a bill, Senate Bill 215. So we will consider that upon adjournment tomorrow down in our regular room. So Senate Bill 215 tomorrow on adjournment.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee, we have two bills this afternoon up at 1:30. Please be in the committee room promptly at 1:30 to deal with Senate Bill 195 and 199. Thanks.
Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. We are meeting today in LSBA, and we will have a different order than what's in your calendar. We will take up House Bill 1397 first, Senate Bill 208 second, and Senate Bill 193 third. See you at 1:30.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Education Committee, we did just receive one more bill, so if you want to pull the bill folder for Senate Bill 221, that's added to our calendar today. And again, we're meeting at the adjournment of the Conference Committee, which is meeting at 1 o'clock.
Representative Conti. Did you have Representative Becker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The initial time I mentioned I set for the conference committee for 1180 doesn't work for the Senate, so Wednesday, 8 a.m., and we'll do it in my office, room 318, northwest corner. So
you need to do it in a, we'll need to do it in a committee room.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
We'll do it in a committee room, and I'll figure out which one that'll be.
Okay, that
Thank
sounds
you.
good. It needs to be recorded and open to the public. Any further announcements or introductions? Members, let me walk through the next 3 days, what the plan is, so you know. We are done for the day. You go to committees and we'll be back on the floor. Hopefully all committees will be done by 4 o'clock and we'll have enjoyment of the roast from the Republican side at 4 o'clock. Then tomorrow we will adjourn to the House. We will break for committees. Appropriations Committee will meet at noon for every bill referred to them. We will come back on the floor at 1:30 tomorrow, deal with everything on seconds, adjourn, and then we might do either tributes to the leaving members tomorrow or Wednesday, and then Wednesday we'll come in, do thirds, and wait as we do conference committees and things ping back and forth between the Senate and the House. So that's just the schedule. I don't think we should expect too long of nights this week at all. So, Representative Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republican members, your lunch should be here any moment. So look for it in the kitchen. And I apologize, but it should be here momentarily. Thank you.
Any further announcements or introductions? Madam Majority Leader.
Maybe we should leave it open.
Yeah, let's just recess just in case.
Okay.
Hold on 1 sec. Madam Majority Leader. Okay, just add it. Okay, sorry. I'm just checking on one thing. Representative, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 1 p.m. this afternoon.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess for 22 minutes. We'll see you back at 1 p.m.